client asks, how can I be present and supportive for my depressed and dying friend without being emotionally depleted? All of us have probably at some point known somebody who they are just miserable, and they didn't used to be, but now they are. And like, they're asking for help and they always want to talk. And every time you do, it's like, damn, dude, you're so negative. And you can't really say it to them because that would break the relationship. And so you want to be there for them because of the history of the relationship, and you want to be a good friend. Supposedly, that's what we think, right? But it drains us. It makes us feel like sucks our life force out. And then we just feel down. And so we don't want to be around them and feel guilty for it and feel shame. So what do? Sometimes it's a person's depressed, but sometimes it's something else is going on. Something that's really fucking uncomfortable and scary. Like they're dying, right? Like somebody who's slowly dying and you don't want to face death. It's uncomfortable to think about death. And so you don't want to be there too much and talk to them too much about it. The experience that I had that was similar to this was with my friend who is Ukrainian, a good friend from Santa Monica. And then he went home to visit his mom right before the war broke out, didn't know that was going to happen, and then got stuck, couldn't leave because he's Ukrainian. So the country got locked down, and he's been stuck there since, doing his best to avoid dying, not wanting to support the way the war is being run. And so in the beginning, we were talking every day, messaging every day, and as time went by, it wasn't every day. It just kept going on, of course, and now it's been years. And there were periods of time over the years where I didn't reach out to him for a while, and then I started to beat myself up for not reaching out to him. But part of the reason I wasn't reaching out, life gets busy and stuff, and it was a thing, it was just going on. But the other part of the reason was I didn't know what to say. It was uncomfortable to reach out to my friend who's still stuck there in this place as at war. I didn't know what to say. I didn't feel like I could do anything. I didn't feel like I could help. I didn't feel like I could make a difference. And so I hesitated to call. Let me mute this thing so it doesn't keep dinging. So I didn't call. I didn't reach out until the guilt for not reaching out got bigger than the discomfort for that. And then I would. But when I did, I opened up to Yarrow and I told him like why I wasn't reaching out. And we have had a few beautiful conversations over the years, both of us in tears, with him telling me about how many people who he did stay in touch with for a while, but then trailed off, and then they wouldn't reach out to him anymore for this reason, because they couldn't handle being around his quote unquote suffering. No, he's not suffering psychologically in a way. He's such a conscious guy and he's making the most of his situation. But of course, the circumstances that he's in is dire, and it was uncomfortable for his friends here in the West, in the States, to be present with that situation. And so they, like me, would pull back. And I could feel his sadness, not for the fact that there's just, there weren't people to talk to, didn't have support, but that the people that he was connected with and cared for couldn't be with his quote unquote pain and his situation. And I realized that, wow, actually, the thing that I could give, the thing that I could always give, is to be present with him and to be okay with his situation. Like, if I can be in conversation with him and I can be that it is okay with me that you are stuck in a war zone, in a war that you don't want to be taking part in. It is okay with me that you have missiles flying over and blowing up buildings around you. It's okay with me that you're seeing people get grabbed by the military in the streets. It's okay with me that you are experiencing these things happening. And what I mean by it's okay with me, it's not, hey, that's good, cool, man, yeah, pro-war. That's not what I mean. I mean that I can be with it, because what you cannot be with will not let you be. And if you're with another human being and that person can be with your suffering that you can't be with, then you get a little bit of that ability to be with your own suffering. And so I think one of the ways, look, there's no right or wrong here. Also, I don't have the story, a good friend does these particular things and a bad friend does these things, or doesn't do those things. I don't have that story. I'm sure I did at some point in my life, and I'm sure unconsciously I probably do, but I declare a way of being in which my freedom is my gift. My being now here is primary, okay? And so for me, the way out of that uncomfortable situation is a number of things. The first is to realize that like the only thing I have to give is my capacity to be present with their suffering and to not suffer myself. And I think some of our confusion is that we think in order to help a person, we have to not just empathize, but sympathize, and we have to suffer too. If I'm not suffering too, then it's not compassionate. And funny that, isn't it? Because compassion, com is the prefix with, passion actually means to suffer. To suffer with is what etymologically compassion means. And so we think that in order to be loving, we have to be compassionate in its historic sense, which is not actually what people need. They don't need us to suffer with them. They need us to love them. I love how Byron Katie says, nobody needs your saving, everybody needs your love. She doesn't say everybody needs your compassion. She doesn't say everybody needs you to suffer with them. They need your love, meaning your presence, your awareness. And if you can contribute that, then that's enough. And I think the reason that it's important to realize for yourself that that's enough is because it's the judgment that it's not enough that creates the situation that is draining, emotionally draining, depressed, or in a difficult situation near you, and you're exposed to that. That's not what drains you. What drains you is the resistance to the situation. I don't want them to die. I don't want them to suffer. This is wrong. This needs to stop. You are resisting in the same way that they are if they're suffering. And through that, you both suffer. But it's not because you're absorbing their depression. It's because you're copying them by doing the same thing. And so if you can be in freedom with their suffering, then at least one of the two of you is not resisting what is. And if you can practice that, you can become stronger in that. So another time, I used to, when I was like early 20s, I was a real estate agent. I don't know how I came to realize it, but I just realized that like death and dying, especially for children, was really uncomfortable for me. And so took me quite a bit of paperwork and go to the police station and getting my background check and getting blood tests and everything. But I got approved to be a guy that goes into the children's hospital to volunteer with the children in the cancer ward who are dying of cancer. These are kids that are terminally ill. Their parents go home at night and on the weekends, and their kids, they're just dying, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. And I would go in once a week and I would sit with these kids and I would read them stories, and they would laugh, and they didn't have hair, and we would have a good time. And then sometimes I'd go back on a Thursday and that kid wouldn't be there anymore. And I'd ask where he was, and the nurse would just start crying. And it was hard. And it grew me because I exposed myself to the fact of life and that people die, children die. And I don't want to shy away from the things that are hard and horrible. And I don't want to believe the story. That thing is an infectious disease. And if I'm near it, it will get into me. I want to experience the capacity to create freedom from the inside out in the presence of suffering, in the presence of death and dying. And so if there's somebody that I have a relationship with that is going through something, I am not going to, when I'm conscious and remember, I'm not going to let that be a reason for me to avoid them. I am going to choose to be present with them and to practice being a yes to their suffering, not a no to it. Being a yes to their dying, not a no to it. Being a yes to the circumstances they're stuck in, not a no to it. I'm okay with that. One of us at least needs to be. And that okayness, that's the love that I can give. That's my highest contribution. That's my freedom. And so this is not a prescription. This is not to say that you or anybody should do this, but it's an opportunity to be present with death and dying as a gift to both yourself and to the person that's in that situation. So there we go.